Format ubiquity. When a card shows up regularly across a lot of game formats, it becomes a hot commodity. A lot of people want it, that starts to create demand, and the price tag on the secondary market will increase as demand increases. Basic economics. Sheoldred is the best example of this, as a minor player in pretty much every format she's legal in, whether it be fringe decks or fully meta decks. She has crept up to be quite expensive. So how do you think a card that's only legal in 2 formats, both of those formats only allowing you to play 1 copy of this card, would fare in terms of desirability and secondary market value? That's right, kids. I'm talking about Mana Crypt, who at time of writing is no longer legal in 2 formats. This video was written and recorded after the ban, so yeah. Mana Crypt is only legal in 1 format now. Prior to its ban, the cheapest printing of Crypt was going for just shy of $200, double what Sheoldred is at the moment. And I'm not going to really reference how expensive Crypt is at the moment in this video, because I think trending up or down, price memory, it's very hard to say where it's going to end up. So I'm just not going to age the video terribly by talking about that. But why is Crypt, or was Crypt, so expensive compared to a super staple across multiple formats? I said formats really weirdly then. Formats. Well, firstly, its availability. Sheoldred is a supposedly in-print mythic from a recent standard set, and thus the number of copies of her floating around in the wild should be pretty high compared to some limited print run card like Mana Crypt. But on top of all of that, in the current climate of Magic, the appeal of a card in standard, modern, or legacy, or any other format for that matter, only carries so much weight and demand in terms of pushing the secondary market price. The reality is, Commander rules the world. Mana Crypt is de facto one of the most powerful cards ever printed. It does what Sol Ring does, which is the best mana rock ever printed, perhaps second to Black Lotus itself and Crypt, except it's cheaper than Sol Ring. It's free, it costs 0 mana. It produces 2 colorless mana at the low cost of getting potentially lightning bolted in the face each turn as you flip a coin. This potential 3 damage in a game of Vintage or Cube or Highlander or any 1v1 format where you can actually play Mana Crypt is a downside. It does increase the clock your opponent's got on you. But in Commander, where you can get shot 10 times and still be ticking, 40 life is one hell of a buffer. And thus, Crypt became what I call a super staple, the de facto best in slot or best in class. If you wanted to play high-powered Magic at the upper echelons or the highest power available, then you have to play Crypt. It was objectively incorrect not to play Crypt. There will be some people saying fringe reasons in the comment section, they always do about Sol Ring and Crypt, but let's be real, if you have access to them, you should be playing them. Even if they can't cast your Commander, they'll cast something in the 99. To be clear, this video is not about the banning. If you want to hear my opinions on that, I've got a whole video that I put out earlier in the week. But it's more so about how weird this card really is. This power outlier was originally given away as a promotional card to tie in with a purchase of a Magic the Gathering novel. It never saw standard play, never saw legacy play, being one of the first cards to go straight into Eternal format but bypassing legacy whilst doing so. And it managed to go unreprinted for 15 years before Wizards started to farm it because Commander became popular. Crypt really is a wild story, a wild beast of a card. So let's unpack a little bit of that in today's video. But first, Original Magic Art reached out to collaborate with me and sponsor this video. They are helping classic Magic artist and comic book illustrator Phil Foglio to run a new exciting Kickstarter in which he's bringing his unique and beloved style to a custom set of tokens for Magic the Gathering. Foglio is classic Magic, one of the more bespoke and humorous artists in the original sort of pantheon, and behind such classics as Greed, Humility, Orcish Librarian, Recycle, and in more recent times, the best Chaos Warp art. Foglio is instrumental in that classic vibe that Magic had with varying art styles and approaches, and he brought a lot of the whimsy and humour to the classic cards with his art. The Kickstarter has just launched and has 36 tokens initially, with stretch goals to implement more into the final project, and add-ons like a Metal Monarch token featuring a riff on the classic Goblin King with Goblin Queen. Follow the link below to check out the Kickstarter and get involved with backing it and getting hold of some of these wonderful tokens. Shout out to Foglio and shout out to Original Magic Art for sponsoring this video. And on the topic of classic art, let's talk about Mana Crypt. It has iconic art from Mark Tedden, the man responsible for some of Magic's most formative earlier works, as well as modern classics and world-building slam dunks. The halls of the Crypt have always felt like the environment of an early first-person shooter, something like Doom, Quake, maybe Hexen. I could almost hear the low-quality MIDI just looking at the twisting corridors, and it oozes atmosphere and otherworldly ambience, the fleshy wall panels doing a lot to evoke questions we can never really have answered. Well, unless you read the book, because it came with a book. If I'm honest, I don't know if the book in which this was bundled with actually explains anything about Crypt. I don't know if it gives us any background. That's something I just didn't have time to figure out for this video, and would love to hear from people who've read it. If you've read it, let me know in the comment section below if the Crypt actually features in the story. These books came out between 1993 and 1996 and were published by HarperCollins prior to Wizards taking over the publishing rights. Promotional cards were not directly bundled inside. Instead, there was a cutout voucher that you mail off to get the card. Arena, the first book utilizing this promotion, had Arena and the god-awful Sewers of Estark as promos. Whispering Woods brought us a vigilant 2/2 red creature, something that bent the rules of what red creatures could do back then. So this age-old debate of colour pie erasure has been raging for the best part of 20 years now. Shattered Chains came with a giant badger as a promo. Final Sacrifice was Mana Crypt, the topic of this video, and the Cursed Lamb was a random one of the 5 promos that they had left in stock. I haven't really been able to find any verifiable information for this, but I remember being told that no one ever got a Crypt with that final book, because they were all gone. Of the 5 promos, 2 of them have never been reprinted since the original printing. Can you guess which ones? I will give you a moment. I will pause right now. This is me pausing. I'm just filling air. Are you ready? Which 2 have not been reprinted? You ready? Well, it's the terrible Sewers of Estark, which is a 4-mana black instant that causes an attacking creature you control to be unblockable if it hasn't been blocked already, so you cast it before blocks. Or if the creature is currently blocked, as a second mode where the creature blocking and the creature attacking do no damage, they get fogged. It's wildly bad for 4 mana. And the Vigilant Centaur, never been reprinted, and no one's really asking for it. Badger got its updated art as a common in 8th edition, and whilst this creature on that card looks suitably majestic and fantasy threatening, it misses out on Liz Danforth's original regal badger god from beyond time and space, entering the forests and carrying an air of arrogance with him. This original art is so good, I love it. So back to Crypt and how it's so significantly stronger than anything else in this set of book promos. It's kind of insane. There's always the argument that in 94, 95 they still didn't know what was broken, but this compared to a 2/2 vigilant creature is kind of bonkers even by those standards. Arena comes the closest of the 5 to Crypt for being a unique effect that you might want access to, a fight effect on a land, but the land itself doesn't tap for mana, a classic from the early days of Magic. Arena has actually had 2 reprints in its lifetime, the classic Time Spiral bonus sheet, and more recently it is showing up in new frame and new art with Mystery Boosted 2. And all of this is super interesting when you consider that these were mechanically unique Magic cards being used to promote the sales of another item, of books. Or arguably they could be the main draw and the book was simply the accessing mechanism. No internet sort of Blizzard direct-to-consumer sales funnel at that time. In many ways, I would say that Mana Crypt and its ilk were the first secret lair. A mail-order direct-to-consumer collection of cards for collectors, and for players, I guess. And it apes the mechanically unique cards of Walking Dead Secret Lair, a secret lair that was so controversial, it upset the community 2 decades later for similar antics of mechanically unique stuff that you can only get for a set amount of time. But that upset was only about 80% as bad as the upset from the community when Crypt got banned. For completionist's sake, there is another card that was mechanically unique and uses a promo to promote another product. Nalathani Dragon. Nalathani Dragon was an exclusive card you got for attending DragonCon back in 1994. The story goes this kind of promo was so unpopular with crowds and fans of the time that Wizards quickly learned that mechanically unique event promos were a bad idea, which instead moved them on to promotional reprints with different art or foiling that we saw with judge foils and event attendance foils in the future. There's a part of this story I can't quite figure out or piece together by looking back on the internet. It's whether or not Mana Crypt was restricted in Vintage immediately back in the day. To explain this a little bit to people who are like new to Magic or not as entrenched as a nerd like me, Vintage is the format in Magic where you can play everything that's ever been illegal barring a small ban list. That ban list is primarily things that don't work in the game anymore, things that have anti or dexterity rules, which is a whole kettle of fish I'm not going to get into right now. So what Vintage does instead is restrict all the powerful cards. The broken stuff that's too good for everything else can be played as a one-of, and thus Vintage decks often have access to all of the Power 9, for example, and a Crypt and a Soul Ring. Like half your deck is like the one-ofs of the best things in Magic, and it's kind of wild. But Vintage was originally Type 1, the main format of Magic, and Type 2, Standard, the format that only involves the latest X number of sets, came a little bit later. And then Type 1.5 came in the interim. Type 1.5 is Legacy, which is all the cards in Magic, but with a much heavier, more restrictive ban list. Basically, everything that was restricted in Vintage was also banned in Legacy at the time. Soul Ring was restricted to 1 copy only in January of 1994, which is before Mana Crypt even got printed. And when Legacy was officially recognized at the time, being called Type 1.5, all cards restricted in Type 1 were automatically banned. But that formality rolled around in about 1996, and that included Crypt Elden Ring being banned. So there's a gap where I believe that was already the case, but it's not formalized in paper or digitally, and I can't really give you a full answer as to whether or not Crypt was legal for a year or not. I'd love to hear from the old heads and the boomers. I posted it on Twitter, and a lot of people said like everything that was restricted, which included Crypt, was banned. But like I said, I'm not 100% sure if Crypt was restricted immediately or whether it was restricted a little bit later. It's hard to say. And whilst this was all the early days of the game, and ultimately the card would have been banned on power level grounds, it is pretty interesting that Crypt was never legal in Legacy as far as we can tell, a thing very few cards get at the accolade of achieving in Magic. It's funny because Crypt became a weird card for Wizards too. It took them 15 years to reprint it. It finally got a judge for in 2011 as a promotional card to be given to higher level judges. And they finally wheeled it out of retirement and allowed the masses a chance of getting their grubby little mitts on it, with it being printed in Eternal Masters. I opened one of these in my first seal pool or draft at GP Prague the year that Eternal Masters came out, and I sold it immediately. I think I traded it in for like $100 of store credit and just bought some fetches or something. Good times. That was in 2016. Later that year, Invention Mana Crypt landed, which is still the biggest, most chased and hyped collectible version of the card to this day, simply because of its scarcity, its prestige, and just how goddamn gorgeous it is. The regularity of the printing started to climb, with it showing up in Mystery Booster 1, and then later down the line, Double Masters as a hype chase card for that set, and eventually as a super duper rare lottery card found in some packs of Lost Caverns of Ixalan in the special guest slot. During the edit, I realized that I had missed out one special chase variant that was more exciting or more expensive than the Kaladesh one, which is the Neon Ink Red Mana Crypt. Basically, when they start doing so many different versions of these cards, I kind of start to have my eyes glaze over a little bit. But I just wanted to add that the Kaladesh one isn't the most expensive out there. The Neon Ink is, and I think it's the red one. Let's be honest, the Kaladesh one looks better anyway, it's just less rare. Basically, Wizards returned to the Mana Crypt well a bit more regularly over time to milk it for equity. Mana Crypt was a card that, once upon a time, no one really gave a shit about. It was just a card that had a bit of a price tag that no one played with, and that price tag crept up as the card became more and more popular in casual formats. Commander made Crypt a super staple that Wizards could tap into to make you want to buy packs. This absolutely busted Magic card, only playable in Vintage and Commander, and I guess Cube and Highlander too, it was a well for Wizards to return to over and over. It always felt like it was a reserve list adjacent card to me in the early days of me playing a lot, and it landing in Eternal Masters was wild and exciting and something I never thought I'd see happen. It was truly a weird and unique oddity in terms of where it fit into the general tapestry of Magic. It so clearly wasn't designed to fit into the game at large, only becoming a more prominent hot ticket item as Commander became popular and the fuck around format became the main way to play Magic. Which is funny because it's a format that arguably you don't need this stuff to play. So it's so funny that became synonymous with it. It became one of like the archetypal cards that you wanted to eventually get to, the things that you aspired to, in the format where this stuff shouldn't matter. I often wonder who actually got to design the rules for it. Was it Garfield himself, another big designer at the studio? Or was it someone working on the book or marketing and accidentally created the most broken mana rock in Magic's history? I couldn't find an answer for this. Maybe one day someone at Wizards of the Coast will spill that info for us. But for now, all I know is that Mana Crypt is one of the weirdest Magic cards that ever got printed. Hope you enjoyed just a little look back, some thoughts in my head, and a little bit of history. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, and don't forget to comment answer some of the questions I asked in there, especially if you have information about how Crypt was. If you enjoy what I do, check out the Patreon link in the description below, and don't forget Fogliotokens are on Kickstarter right now, so if you support them for the link in the description below, it helps to support the channel, and helps to support a fantastic, old school, classic Magic artist as well. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.